Los Angeles, a dame with 1,000 faces, and every one of them under a thin veil of smog. The kind of place where the sun sets like a spilled drink across the Pacific, all fiery and bloodshot, only to be replaced by a neon glow that promises everything and delivers nothing but a hangover. The air itself hangs heavy, thick with the scent of jasmine, exhaust fumes, and desperation. You could practically taste the ambition, clinging to the back of your throat like a cheap whiskey. Out in Hollywood, the dreams were manufactured under Klieg lights, shiny and artificial, then tossed aside like last week's newspaper. Down in the gutters they festered, growing sharp teeth and cold eyes. The streets, they were a labyrinth of shadows and sudden blinding light. Palm trees, skeletal against the bruised sky, whispered secrets only the wind truly understood. And the people, they moved like automatons, each one carrying a hidden story, a betrayal, a forgotten promise. The dames were all trouble, with lips like a bruise and eyes that could freeze a man at 20 paces. The men, well, they were just trying to keep their heads above the rising tide of corruption, or maybe they were the ones stirring the waters. Justice, if it existed, was a blindfolded whore, bought and sold in back rooms with the clinking of ice in glasses and the rustle of dirty money. The law was a suggestion, easily bent, often broken. And death was just another character in the play, always waiting in the wings, ready for its cue, usually when you least expected it or when you thought you had everything figured out. L.A. It was a beautiful, terrible trap, and once you were in it, you were just another piece on the chessboard, waiting for the next move, the next double cross, the next bullet with your name on it. It was a hot evening in the city, the kind of heat that made you feel as if you were wearing a lava tuxedo. It seemed as if my atomic breath would actually cool things down a little bit. Between the heat and the crush of a city that was failing to fulfill the dreams of the throngs of hopeful saps that wandered into it, the cops and the news hounds were kept busy. Sirens blared day and night, and newspapers had a new gruesome headline daily. Despite all that action, I hadn't had a meaningful and decent paying case in months. Nothing more than cheating husbands and missing people who later turned up on their own. This needed to change quickly, or I wouldn't even have 2 nickels to pinch together. My office was a box on the 4th floor of a building that didn't bother with a name. Just another anonymous slab of concrete squeezed between its equally anonymous brethren. Folks called it the Woolworths Building, not because of any grand sign or civic pride, but because the five and dime hogged the entire ground floor, spewing out the scent of cheap perfume and hot dogs into the street below. The building wasn't fully fitted out for us kaiju, so I had to enter and leave the Woolworths building loading docks. There was a convenient empty storage space next to the store that I rented for my living quarters. It had been 15 years since the treaty between the kaiju and the humans, and although some progress had been made, there was still a lot that wasn't yet accommodating to our needs. My office was on the 4th floor, same as a dozen other doors, same as a dozen other days. I was a fixture of the 4th floor, same as the chipped plaster and the ghost of last week's cigarette smoke. The only thing that gave the place a second glance was the gold lettering on my door, polished brighter than a debutante's smile. It read, Gdz Private Investigations. Once you crossed that threshold, the stylishness stopped. The furniture was a collection of bad decisions and worse luck, and the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and yesterday's regrets. I had been a private investigator since I decided to leave the police force 3 years ago. Gamera and I joined the police force shortly after the treaty, but I didn't care for the job very much and I left. Too many rules, too many idiots with stripes, and too many on the take. Gamera stayed on and is now a homicide detective. He made it on his own smarts, and as far as I know, he never took a bribe. The treaty between the humans and us kaiju stipulates that the kaiju are not allowed to hold any high public office, so Gamera will never advance higher than detective. He claims to be happy where he is. The big lug never had any aspiration for leadership and was happy as a follower. That is what makes him a team player, as I have always relied on. I used my kaiju instincts and the techniques I learned as a cop to try the more free exercise of detective work as a private dick. The treaty did permit us to have as much success as we could in the private sector. Of all of us, Ghidorah was the most successful, being the leader of the local mob. The alleged crimes committed by the mob were never tied to him directly or directly to the mob. Such would violate the treaty and result in immediate destruction, but having the mayor of LA in your pocket kept the law at bay. I, of course, knew of the possible violations, but proof would be needed to send him to justice, and I hadn't a shred. Besides, extortion, racketeering, prostitution, and money laundering didn't violate the ancient code, so I would let the humans deal with it until they couldn't. Behind the door with the gold lettering was my reception room. Right now, it was painfully vacant. Even the small desk with the phone and typewriter was vacant due to my inability to afford a secretary. There was a couch for waiting clients, which hadn't happened in a while, and several framed paintings hung on the walls. I couldn't tell you where they were from or who painted them since they were on the walls when I moved in. The other door in the reception room was wide open and led to my actual office. Both of these doors were widened to kaiju specifications, which was the only concession the landlord would make for me, and only because he really needed the tenant. Inside my office, there was a bookshelf on the wall opposite the door that lied, implying that I had actually read those books. On the back wall were more pictures from the previous tenant, and on the wall, where I could see it every day, was the ancient symbol of the balance, the Yahi in white and the Yahan in black. This was the very same symbol that the humans now call the yin and the yang. None of the humans have a hint of our history, and that sits well with us. Stacked in one corner were the daily LA Times. Even if I didn't read them all of the time, I still kept them. They were my reference library. My desk was a nothing fancy dark wooden and unadorned type of desk that you would describe as a basic desk. On the left side of it was a stack of papers that looked important, but should have already been filed away or in the trash. On the right side of the desk was an ashtray with more cigarette and cigar butts outside it than in it. Next to that was a half-empty bottle of rye, and propped up in the center of the desk was a pair of feet. My feet. My hat was down on my face, and I was checking my eyelids for leaks. Satisfied that no light was getting in, I had fallen asleep. I dreamt of a horse and a jockey at the starting gate, and I had a wad of cash on that horse. The starting gun went off and accidentally shot my horse when a noise woke me. My outer door had opened and a possible client was coming in. I dropped my feet to the floor, took off my hat, and looked up to see who had caught me napping. It was a dame. She drifted through the main door like smoke from a high-priced cigarette, all silk and sparkle, the kind of dame who could buy and sell your whole neighborhood without breaking a sweat. Her clothes looked like they'd cost more than my last 3 cases combined, and the ice on her wrist probably glittered brighter than my future. Trailing her like a shadow was a slab of a man trying to pass as tough, stuffed into a suit that looked a size too small. I'd seen his kind before, muscle on a leash, usually packing enough heat to start a small war. They always act like my kind don't faze them, all stone faces and tight jaws. But when the real dirty work starts, they usually turn out to be all bark and no bite. Their tough guy act melting faster than an ice cube in July. She stopped at the open door to my office.
Am I disturbing you, Mr. Zilla?
No, you caught me at a good time. I'm between cases currently, I said as I rose to half my height and motioned to the plush client's chair. Please have a seat, Miss.
Fletcher. Dolores Fletcher.
I should have recognized her, and I probably would have given a few more minutes. She was in all the society gossip rags, rich, fashionable, attractive, and wild enough to keep her name in the headlines. She took a seat in the chair. The gorilla behind her stood there like the royal guard at Buckingham Palace. For a short period of time, Dolores and I sat staring and examining each other. Was she curious like other humans I've met? Or maybe she didn't know I would be a kaiju. Or maybe she was trying to intimidate her way into gaining some kind of edge. Most men didn't try to attempt that kind of thing with me, so this skirt had gumption. Gumption or not, if she expected me to fawn over her celebrity like most of the saps that orbit her world, she was going to be disappointed. Sizing her up, I found that she was slim but not frail. Her lips were cherry red. Her hair, black as Rodan's eyes, was cut in the bob style that was popular with the flappers of today. Her eyes were sapphire globes, and her skin was living porcelain. She wore a blue one-piece dress in the flapper style, and she was adorned with enough rings, bracelets, and necklaces to approach excessive without actually achieving it. Publicly, she was both admired and despised, but people never stopped talking about her. She did not start the flapper fashion, but she made it popular. She went to all the right parties, was seen with all the right eligible bachelors, and wore all the right clothes. I wondered how she did all this on her father's professor's salary, but that wasn't for me to question, at least not now. She gave me the kind of look a dame gives you when she's trying to decide if you're a sap or just playing one. Dolores Fletcher, a name you'd see in the society pages next to fancy dogs and charity balls, was known for her quick wit and even quicker tongue. But she was taking her sweet time with me. The silence was thick, cut only by the sound of the drag she took on her cigarette. The cherry on the end glowed like a tiny malevolent eye in the dim light of my office. Finally, she exhaled a cloud of smoke that hung between us like a ghost.
My father wants to hire you, Mr. Zilla.
Your father wants to hire me, and he sends you and this gorilla down to the 500 block to do it? I said with an eye on the gorilla. For the first time since he came in, there was an expression on the goon's face, and he took a step towards me. He was stopped dead in his tracks with one delicate and jeweled hand. Not ever taking her eyes off me, she said,
He cannot come here himself. He is a very busy man. He's a scientist and professor at UCLA.
I only follow the society rags when it involves a case, which had been up to this point never. The recent shooting death of Kurt Fletcher the other day sparked my interest, and I read the Times article about that. They mentioned the murder briefly and then went straight into coverage of Dolores and how she was handling the loss of her brother. Nothing much further about that. I'm sorry for your loss, miss, I said as gracefully as I could. Her lips tightened and she simply nodded once.
Yes, well, that's what I'm here to see you about. My father wants you to investigate the murder.
Why doesn't he go to the cops?
He did.
Being a woman of few words is one thing, but this broad was taking it to extremes. It was beginning to get irritating. And
Our family is German. My father brought us over here when I was a baby. This was before the war, but we are still looked at suspiciously. My father doesn't think that the police are really trying to solve this case. He thinks I might be next.
That explains him, I said, pointing at the bodyguard. And he wants someone who has no beef with the Krauts to look into it.
Yes.
Can do. My rates are $50 a day plus expenses. This was higher than my normal rates, but if she balked, I could lower it a bit. She didn't. Instead, her hand went up and the gorilla, looking like a bad idea in an expensive suit, dropped an envelope into it. She flicked it onto my desk. A fat promise of greenbacks.
4 days retainer.
She stood up, a movement that rustled silk and perfume, and added,
We want this wrapped up yesterday.
I let my eyes drift toward her shadow, the one with the knuckles that probably dragged on the floor. Why? This gorilla cramping your style? She stopped in the doorway, and with a smile as fake as a whore's affections, said,
Don't try to be funny, Mr. Zilla. Your kind doesn't have the knack.
She glanced around my office quickly.
I'm surprised that style is even in your vocabulary.
She was rich, and I needed the money. I let the insult slide off me. You're right. Funny is a dangerous business. But just so you know, I wasn't even trying. Then she exited, leaving only the scent of money and a hint of something dangerous hanging in the air. I popped the cork on the bottle of rye, a sound as lonely as a last word, and poured a shot into the glass. The amber liquid sat there, a silent witness to a case that had too many questions and too little answers. I slammed back the shot, and the rye burned a straight line down to my belly, a fire trying to put out another fire. It was approaching evening, and with little prospects of any more clients coming to see me, I closed up shop for the day. Time to do a little thinking and get some food. I walked the short distance to Skip's Diner on the corner, my usual stop. The day shifters had packed it all in. The gray flannel suits, the shoppers with their little shopping bags, the tourists, they were all gone. The night crowd was getting ready to punch in. The grifters, the dames who worked the corners, the kind of men who walk with their hands in their pockets and a hungry look in their eyes. Skip's City Diner was large for the typical greasy spoon. The food, while only passable, was at least always hot and served fast. Either Betty or Millie usually served me, and it was one of the few grub shops that could accommodate us kaiju. It was not uncommon to see Gamera in the joint, and Mothra had been there once, but this was not her kind of place. I sat in my usual booth. It was large enough for me. Betty was serving me today, and I ordered a steak, some sausages, a roast chicken, and some black coffee. Then I pulled out my notepad and began to write down what I knew about the case. That didn't take long. Writing down what I didn't know would take much longer. First thing tomorrow, research. Tonight, whiskey at the Blind Tiger.